Well, good afternoon again. Those of you who come to this event regularly will know something of the Absoft story. Today I'm actually, rather than talking about the past or the past year, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's happening now and a little bit about one of the issues that we face at the moment, which is entering the Norwegian market. But before I do that, just for those of you who haven't been here before, if I can do a very brief introduction to set the scene a wee bit. So, Absoft are an IT consulting firm. As a business, we try and deliver solutions to customers that are for the long term and are the best value over time. And we like to do that, I think we do that by using our industry expertise and business process knowledge along with the technical stuff that you'd normally associate with an IT company. But we see ourselves as bringing technology and process business knowledge together rather than just putting some bit of IT in and letting you get on with it. As the grey hairs continue to grow, it's more than 20 years now since we set up Absoft. We've been in the SAP consulting world since 1992. SAP is our chosen business application. It's the market leader in the world, and it's the one that we specialise in working with. We've been Aberdeen based, although we've got outlets in London and Stavanger now. Turnovers in the 10 to 14 million range, depending on how the year goes. And we now employ around about 140 people. So growing substantially and fairly steadily throughout the last 20 years. One of the things about working in Aberdeen and being in the oil and gas business is that you're part of a global business. And that's a great opportunity. And indeed, it's pretty much a necessity because most of the oil and gas companies that we work with are global businesses themselves. So over the years, we've been around most of the world. Somebody catalogues all these countries, some more interesting than others and some more dangerous than others. And these are some of the companies that we work with. The ones up on the right here are the exploration production companies, drilling companies, manufacturing companies, and some of the smaller emerging operators, because as the oil and gas business grows, typically the large guys don't want to deal with a lot of stuff that's aging, etc., and there's lots of new entrants to the markets, typically. As I said, we are an IT consulting company, but we like to think that we provide a lot more than just the IT pieces. So as well as implementing systems for companies, we also spend time trying to make the systems work better, refresh them, retrain people, and provide indeed support both on site and globally from our office in Aberdeen. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background to what we do. I want to turn now to just compare and contrast some things about Scotland and Aberdeen versus Norway. And the reason for doing this is because it's a decision that we are on the point of making at the moment about, we do business in Norway and we need to enter the market much more seriously. So we've got a bunch of decisions to make about how we do that, and this is just to put some things in context. I don't know, there was a programme on, I think it was BBC last night, of a lady who was setting up a restaurant in Macclesfield, and she was being advised by, I think, an experienced restaurateur. Like, typically I was looking at the PC and half watching the TV at the same time. And you could see the balance between her passion, drive and intuition about what she wanted to offer, and the guy who knows how to do it saying, "You haven't thought of that?" A big example was she was going to look after serving 50 people in the restaurant herself. And he's saying, well, actually, you need about 3 or 4 people to do that, so you better. So it's quite interesting, and the balance, of course, between intuition and doing your research and planning, where, if you're an entrepreneur, does that sit? So I want to look at Scotland and Norway, which is the this large segment is our Scottish business, is about 40%, and this is the Norwegian, which is about 20% of our revenue. So Scotland, first of all. I'm from the Central Belt. I'm a Glaswegian, so I feel I can talk a bit about the Central Belt. And one of the things that if you set up a business in Aberdeen is that, from my point of view, you are very dislocated from where the majority of people in Scotland live and want to work. I don't want to characterise things wrongly. I'm very conscious that Lucinda's from outside Edinburgh or around about Edinburgh. But in these days where families typically impose 2 wage earners, getting labour to move from the Central Belt to somewhere like Aberdeen is not an easy thing to do. And over the years, though we've got better at it, typically what happens is the person who works for us commutes on a weekly basis. The families almost never move up to be Aberdeen based in our experience. So that's an issue caused partly by our location, and one or two other things we'll look at Aberdeen later on. The second thing I think about, particularly if you're working in the oil and gas services businesses in the UK, is you pretty much need to work in Aberdeen and London. Now, those are the 2 places where the oil and gas industry is predominantly. And that's a big contrast when we look at Norway. In terms of the economic landscape in which we work, well, we have a broadly based economy in Scotland. Oil and gas is part of what we do. It's not the dominant part. Unlike Norway, government in the UK and Scotland has chosen not to create a sovereign wealth fund. So many of the, not only Norway, but many of the countries in the Middle East have set up their own investment funds where they take a portion of oil revenues every year, put it in, and it's for the good of the country in the long term. But we don't have that environment here. Government and finance are concentrated in Edinburgh. That it's not been a huge thing for us, and I think the position actually is changing quite a bit. I think there's now considerably greater efforts being made for government in Edinburgh to talk to Aberdeen about business in Aberdeen and what needs done. And it's certainly the case that there's much more interest nowadays than you'd have found 20 years ago when we started up about making capital investment and finance available in Aberdeen. I've just left 2 question marks, and I'm not going to get into the independence debate. I see George Osborne today is telling us we won't get the pound if we go independent. But if in terms of looking to the future, I guess we're not that far away from the decision. So whichever way it goes, we'll be living in a settled world come September, hopefully. But I suppose an overriding concern I do have about Scotland and the way it works is, if I could simplify this and say Scotland typically is more concerned about how it divides and spends the wealth than it is about how it creates the wealth a lot of the time, and that is a concern going forward. Some specifics about Aberdeen. I think Aberdeen over time has changed and now has become very international in its outlook. There's high quality education, not just from Robert Gordon's, but from the other place as well, I believe. And one of the things that Ian Woods was desperate to promote for a long time, I think is beginning to happen, the Aberdeen actually becoming a global oil hub, so that it's got sustainability that's not entirely dependent on what we do in the North Sea. There are some downsides, however, to the Aberdeen story. In terms of employment costs and in terms of people choosing to come to Aberdeen to work, London and Aberdeen, to a certain extent Edinburgh, are relatively high cost locations for people to come and live and work, and that can be a barrier to people coming. I'm not going to go on about the Central Belt again. For us as a company, it's a great place because lots of our customers are on our doorstep, but of course these customers compete with us for talent, so I'm sure that people graduating from this university, you've a range of places to go and work, and I'm sure the oil and gas companies are keenly sought after positions. And another factor that affects what we do is that because we're virtually unique in terms of being an SAP oil and gas business, there is no local SAP consulting base that we can tap into on a contract basis. There are a few people, but not enough to be able to utilize them greatly. Just quickly, so what have we chosen as how we do business here? Well, we very much have a single operating office with sales outlet in London. We've deliberately chosen to have no low cost operating locations. So we don't have a Indian or Far East back office. We don't have a Bulgarian or Romanian back office. We don't have a Glasgow or a Thurso back office, and there are companies that have made decisions about them to go low cost. So we've decided that the value of our people being able to work together in one location outweighs these potential benefits. In terms of people, we feel we've very much had to pick a strategy of growing our own. Strong graduate recruitment. I think over the last couple of years we've recruited something like 20 graduates, and they're nearly all still with us. And as well as recruiting graduates, both graduates and people that we recruit from elsewhere, we have a strong emphasis on their own personal development. So we kind of feel that we have to invest in building the skills that we're offering to the marketplace. We can't simply go out and buy them ready-made and bring them in. So we're now looking at Norway. The reason we're looking at Norway, we are working there already, but something like 40% of our sales pipeline is for Norwegian opportunities. So that's a pretty strong reason for looking at going into a market. And before you maybe travel to or think much about Norway, I mean, one of the things, 5 million people, that's about the same as Scotland, etc. It is. But it's a vastly different geography. To go from the south of Norway right up to Hammerfest in the north by road is almost 1,500 miles, whereas to go from Land's End to John O'Groats is about 800. So we're talking about a massive country, and many things come out of that, even for our consulting business. So I said we're in Norway because of the opportunities. There's a lot of operating companies setting up in Norway. Used to be purely Statoil, but it's now being liberalised, if you like, so there's many other startup companies. There's quite a bunch of Norwegian drilling companies, and there's another group of Norwegian service companies. So the oil and gas market in Norway is developing quickly just now, and I say it's being freed from being totally Statoil dependent. For us, it's also good there's no local Norwegian specialist oil and gas SAP company, partly for geography reasons. Norway is a highly regulated environment. That's great if you provide IT systems, because you've got some of the answers to proving compliance to the safety and health and other work-based authorities. And lastly, of course, because we're in business to make money and grow, we get good quality fees in Norway. Okay, so we're going into Norway. You'd naturally think, well, we're probably going to go to set up in Stavanger. And you think, okay, that's okay. But Stavanger's not Aberdeen, although superficially people think it is. It's quite a lot smaller. It is very localised, and it is very difficult to get people to commute from Oslo to Stavanger to work. So it's actually a very small place in some senses. The roads in Norway, as I know from being on holiday this year, the speed limit in most of them is 50 mile an hour, so you're not going to go by road very quickly, road/ferry. I think the fact that Norway's got 98 airports tells you quite a lot about how people get around the country. But of course, it's 1,500 miles and it's small planes, so it takes a long time. One of the great things about Aberdeen over the years is that, when I first worked in Norway, mid-90s, you could fly to Stavanger or you could fly to Stavanger. Nowadays, you've got Oslo, Kristiansand, Bergen, and there's about 3 airlines providing it. So Aberdeen Airport has been very important for us and is very important for many of the businesses that are locally based. Government policy in Norway. One of the things that I didn't really appreciate until I started to learn a little bit more is that wherever people live in Norway, it's positive Norwegian government policy to support that. So if you've got 2 houses at the end of a fjord, every day they will get either a ferry, a bus, or a train. Because the commitment is enormous by the government to supporting communities where people live. So, and that applies if you go right up the coast of Norway and imagine all the offshore platforms all the way up. That means there's oil businesses located in Stavanger, Bergen, Kristiansand, Haugesund, Trondheim, Tromsø, and even the Hammerfest are looking at building an oil base there to support the Arctic Sea. Norway does have a sovereign wealth fund. They've got the second highest per capita GDP in the world. They're the second wealthiest country. They don't have any they do have national debt, but it's offset by the credit balance, so they're a net creditor rather than a net debtor. So it's a very different feel, which has consequences when you come to look at employing people. So for us, and these are things we've found out, we haven't decided yet how we're going to do this, but there's a very strong attitude that Norwegian is best. That's not atypical of many countries, of course, and it's not to be saying, I'm not accusing them of being xenophobic or anything like that, it's just Norwegian is best. That's the way it is. Partly because of government policy, but also it's something innate in people. They have really strong local communities and culture. And one of the things that leads to is people expect to work where they live. So we've been in projects where there's been commitment from a partner company that somebody's coming from Oslo to work in Stavanger. He turns up 2 days out the first 10 and then says, I'm not doing it. People just expect that they will live and work locally. So if we're going to invest in putting consultants on the ground in Norway, how are we going to do that? Or is there other ways of addressing the mobility challenge? 2 other things that are very important. In these communities, networking is really important in terms of how you penetrate into the market. And so part of that leads us back to saying language is important. So obviously we at some point are going to have to employ Norwegians. Bill McCall did this lecture 8 or 9 years ago, the guy that took Clyde blowers from number 8 in the world to number 1. And I remember speaking to him at dinner, and he was very clear that you don't enter a country by taking a bunch of expatriates and putting them over in another country. That doesn't work. You have to find local people. You can support them with expatriates and your business processes, etc. But you cannot do it. And I've spoken to many other companies about the same thing, and that is a very strong message that you have to go with local people to build your business. So that means new people coming into your business that you're going to trust with development. So what does all that add up to? I don't have any answers. I can't tell you what our Norwegian market entry strategy is. I thought I'd leave you with a sort of ongoing case study today. Big questions for us, office locations. You could justify us opening an office in 3 or 4 different places in Norway, but that's an enormously expensive thing to do. How do we find the correct local management, correct local sales force, local consultants, and what in the Norwegian context does a local consultant mean? One of our competitors has about 30 consultants in Oslo, and they're doing a job about 200 kilometres away. They fly people from Copenhagen to do the job in Norway because they can't get the folk in Oslo to travel the 200 kilometres. So what's our answer? This is almost the biggest thing. If we're going to invest in Norwegian staff, how are we going to deal with the mobility question? I don't have the answer. I'm just putting out some of the parameters for you. And lastly in all this, if we're going to do all this, it's going to cost us some money. And as with all the businesses, the question of where the investment capital is coming from is an important one. So, as I grow older, I tend to, when I speak, leave more questions than answers. So that's my thing at the moment anyway. So I'm leaving you with a bunch of questions, but hopefully an insight into a real business dilemma that we've got at the moment that we're trying to work through. So I'm going to close now and hand you over to Lucinda, who's going to tell you another tale. Thank you very much.
Hello, I think, is this working? Now I've been built into my paraphernalia. Just like to say thank you very much for welcoming me to Aberdeen Business School. It's really, really great to be here, so thank you very much. And Heather, thank you very much for introduction a moment ago. It was great to hear Ian's speech. I've certainly learned from every single speech I hear. You just pick up little subtleties that you think, oh right, yes, that'll really help me. When we look at Norway, we're not in Norway yet, so I'll remember all of those things. Just to start, I think it's just really great to see you all here. You've all got a real thirst for learning and a thirst for sort of forwarding yourselves and really making the most of life, and taking risks and being innovative and creative and using your energy and hopefully in the end being a great employer. Entrepreneurs employ a lot of people. It's really brilliant, firstly, just to see you all here, and good for you for taking an interest in really furthering yourselves and many other people who work with you in the future. Your country needs you. You are what makes our economy dynamic. There's clearly lots of very dynamic people in Norway, so we should probably learn quite a lot from entrepreneurs over there who are making a huge success of their businesses. But really, just this slide just shows the power really of self-employment. Literally just 1% increase in people being self-employed leads to 22 billion more for the economy. There are 50% of the UK population that would like to run their own business, but only 6% actually do it in the end. And that's because running a business is really tough. It's not easy. And I think probably you can see from this slide that the easier life is in a country, people are less entrepreneurial. I think a lot of entrepreneurism comes from necessity, actually, having to go out there and create your own luck. And we can see that happening in China and America and Brazil to a greater extent than we have in the UK. But the fact that you're here really makes it much more likely that you guys will go out there and succeed and do a great job. So it's a good start. I think as far as making sure you're in the right place to learn the basic skills you need for business, it's all about attitude. It's all about just going for it, being brave. And here are just a few tips, a few attributes that help you be a great entrepreneur. As well as surrounding yourself with inspiring people who give you energy, identifying gaps in the market, making sure that people understand what your idea is so that you can suck people in and persuade people that actually they want to be involved in your idea too. Never being arrogant, making sure that you do actually have an idea that people really want. Never being deluded. It's very easy to get carried away with your idea. Always making sure that you really look into it and really are clear that there is a great opportunity out there. Communicating that to the people that you need to help you recognising, as Heather said at the beginning, that you can't do everything yourself. Quite often need a lot of help from other people. You are probably incredibly talented in some areas, but you won't have all the skills. And it's really important to recognise that to do well in business, you need lots of people around you that are much better than you are at all of the things that, you know, you're slightly unsure of. You need to be able to trust people. You have to follow your instinct. That's really important. You have to be creative. You have to be a lateral thinker. You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to learn, and actually also not being afraid of failure, because let's face it, a lot of businesses fail. I don't know what the fail rate is at the moment in this environment, but you know, there are lots of businesses out there that are failing for lots of different reasons, not just because people don't quite have what it takes. There are plenty of things out there that are causing failure at the moment, and I think it's important just to realise that that is part of business. You can't win in every single aspect of what you're doing. And I think the other thing that's really important is enjoying it. You know, you only have one life, and we want to make the best of it and enjoy what you're doing. So just after that little pep talk, I'm going to just take you through what we're going to be covering today. I've got another sort of 30 minutes or so. I'm going to tell you how I've used my entrepreneurial skills. I think I have a good positive attitude to life. I certainly didn't have everything that it takes to build a successful business, and I still don't. You know, I still need lots of people around me to make my company succeed. So I'll tell you how we've got to 40 million in the last 7 years. Definitely not all down to me, that's for sure. The position where we are now and hopefully where we're going. We've got lots and lots of opportunity for the future, and obviously it would be helpful to you guys to just share with you what I've learnt along the way. So when I started on this great journey 7 years ago, or even actually it was a decade ago really, there were about 15% of people regularly avoiding gluten and wheat in the UK. Does anyone know what gluten is here? What's gluten?
Well, explaining it's more difficult. It's kind of a constituent part of what you've got in a lot of wheats and barleys and everything.
Yeah.
Grains that you have.
Yeah, it's the elastic protein that you find in wheat flour, in rye and in barley, and often oats are contaminated with it too. So if you can't eat gluten, you quite often can't eat oats as well. And the reason I was looking into all of this in the first place is that I have 3 sons. My first son's dairy free, my second son is gluten intolerant, and my third son actually can eat everything, so he got there in the end. But yes, third time perfect. But what was really difficult, the dairy free was okay because it's just, you know, you can use soy milk and you can use oat milk and it's not that difficult. Gluten is a nightmare. 2/3 of food in this country contains gluten. We use flour for everything. We use it for thickening sauces. We use it for the basis of baked products. We use it for coating products, for frying. You know, so breaded products, floured products. Everything is covered in flour or contains flour. And so trying to find anything ready to eat is very, very difficult. When I started to look into this market, you know, we were really struggling as a family to eat the same at meal times because I'd never had to cook without wheat before. I mean, fortunately, I'm a chef, so it wasn't as difficult for me as it is for lots of other people, but I had to really re-educate myself about how I was going to cook normally for my family. And we were really struggling with just giving my son a normal diet. That's what I feel passionate about, that people who have dietary restrictions should be able to eat normally. You know, they deserve normality more than any of the rest of us, really. And bread is the food that we all eat all the way through the day. It's the ultimate convenience food. You have it for breakfast, you might have a piece of toast for a snack, you have a sandwich for lunch or a soup and a roll. You might have toast and jam in the afternoon, and you might well eat bread again in the evening. You know, it's something that you just eat all the way through the day. And, you know, packed lunches were really difficult. couldn't send him to school with a normal packed lunch. We couldn't just go on an impulsive picnic. If we were travelling somewhere, what do I take? You know, I don't have any bread that I can make a sandwich with. What's he going to eat on the way? So you'd have to come up with some elaborate meal, you know, that we could pack into boxes and take with us. So life was actually really inconvenient. And when I looked around the shops, you know, I was scanning desperately for a bread that, you know, that tasted great. And it was all just this horrible, dry, crumbly stuff in matte packaging with a shelf life of 9 months plus quite often. And, you know, just to really add insult to injury, quite often the bread cost about £6 plus. It was really expensive. And then when you open the pack, the whole lot just fell into crumbs, and you couldn't do anything with it, and it all just went in the bin, and it just made me really cross. So when I started looking into it, there were 15% of the people in the country who were in the same position as me. Only 2.4% of those people ever bought the gluten-free bread on offer because it was so appalling. And they would only eat about a 20th of the normal bread consumption, probably because they could only get one slice out of the pack that actually stuck together. The rest would have just been completely useless. And you couldn't make a fresh sandwich. You had to stick it in the microwave, or you had to toast it to make it edible. So you couldn't take a sandwich to work or to school or whatever. So really, really not very functional at all, and highly unsatisfying. So I felt that with my background and my family need, that I would really have a good go at trying to sort this out. Because if we were struggling with me being a chef at home, you know, what were other people finding? You know, how were other people coping? And I am someone who likes to sort of do useful things. I'm not very good at working hard at something that I don't really believe in. I wanted to be a doctor at one stage. I wanted to help people in some way. I have got a really sort of strong sort of desire to do something useful in life, and I just felt this would really make a difference to people. So over the last 5 years, really, since we've taken the bread to market that I developed, and I'll explain to you how I went about that, we have actually, you know, it just absolutely reflects the desperate need in the market. You know, we've trebled the overall gluten-free bakery market to over 57 million. We're brand leaders with a 50% share of bread, and 15% of all gluten-free, and that is pretty much based on our bread. You know, bread is our core product. We make other products too, but they are a much smaller part of our business. And the reason that bread is just such a holy grail is because it is the ultimate convenience food, but it's really inconvenient to make. So, you know, when I was developing the bread at home, it takes 4 hours to make a loaf of bread because you have to, you know, prove it, you have to rise it, and then you'd knock it back, and then you'd rise it again, and then you bake it off, and then you have to let it cool down, and it takes 4 hours to make. So, you know, you can't just rustle bread up. And that is really what we do, is we work on the products that give people convenience but are incredibly inconvenient to make. So we take on all that inconvenience and make our lives very difficult for ourselves, but I like a challenge, so that's fine. We've created a mainstream category. Our products are beginning to enter mainstream aisles in the supermarkets, because we're not just now, because our quality has improved and improved and improved, we're not just catering to the people like my son who absolutely have to cut gluten from the diet. We're now catering to people who feel that a gluten-free lifestyle or a lower gluten lifestyle is actually beneficial, and they want to just be able to buy our bread along with all of their other mainstream products. So that's really exciting. We're now going into other markets around the world, and obviously the most important thing is that we're transforming people's lives. You know, on a daily basis, we are changing people's lives. And so we have an incredibly passionate team of people, many of whom have been with me really pretty much from the word go. So it's very exciting. I feel very privileged to be doing what I'm doing. So just to give you a little bit of background behind gluten intolerance and the different spectrum of gluten intolerance, I'll explain to you what celiac disease is. Celiac disease is the worst kind of gluten intolerance. It's the worst kind of intolerance to the protein that you find in wheat and rye and barley and sometimes oats. It manifests itself in lots of different ways. You might just literally have a bit of bloating. You might find that you're breaking bones weirdly, when you haven't actually fallen over very much, or particularly hard, and a bone breaks, and you go for a scan, and you're told that you have low bone density. So you might not have any other, or might never have had any other symptoms, and it's because you can't absorb the calcium in your diet. Basically, with celiac disease, the wheat or the barley or the rye travelling through your gut causes your gut to inflame, and you have lots of little villi, lots of little finger-like projections in your gut, which allows you to absorb the nutrients in your food. And they become inflamed, and the passage of food going through your gut actually wears those villi away, so you can't absorb, even a third of the nutrients that you would normally absorb when you eat a balanced diet. So you could be eating the best diet in the world, but you might only be getting a fraction of the nutrients that you need to be healthy. You might just have a thyroid problem. You might not have the bloating and the gassiness and the funny tummies that you often hear about that go with celiac disease. You might have thyroid problems. It's because you can't absorb the iodine in your diet. You might be anemic. It's because you can't absorb the iron in your diet. So it really does manifest in lots of different ways. And the great thing is these days the medics are much more on it. People are referred for celiac testing much faster than they used to be. Unfortunately, when I started out, the average age of diagnosis was 60, and the average time it would take to diagnose someone was 13 years, because people just didn't really know what it was. They'd say it was IBS, or that people were depressed, or faddy. People were told that they were faddy and just to get over it. Whereas now the awareness is just so much higher. And fatty eaters, so fatty children now are being sent straight for celiac testing. So it's either a blood test or a little biopsy, because quite often that child is not being naughty, there's actually something wrong. So there's been a big change in the awareness over the last 5 years, which is brilliant. So we're not just now catering to the people who really desperately need gluten-free products. Those are the need to group. We've got 4 groups of consumers here now. The better twos are people with sort of arthritis, IBS, that sort of thing, that know they feel better without gluten. There's another group of consumers called the like twos. They're actually growing fast at the moment with the increased awareness of the benefits of a gluten-free lifestyle. And those are people that do lots of training for marathons, and they take sport seriously. They're worried about their well-being. They like to have sort of great variety in their diet. And they're quite faddy. They're very in tune with food trends. They come and go. They'll be our fickle consumers. But they are increasingly trying our products because we are, of our availability improvements, our quality improvements, cost is gradually coming down. All of these things really matter to attract those group in. And then there's another 16% of the population. So we're talking about a big group of people here who have heard about the benefits of gluten-free. They've heard that gluten-free food is lighter. It makes you feel less tired than eating lots and lots of wheat. They've heard that it's just good to have more variety in the diet. And they would very much like to try gluten-free foods if they could find it, if the food was readily available on the shelves along with all of their other shopping, that the cost comes down. It's incredibly expensive to make gluten-free products at the moment because the market is still quite small. So we're working very hard to attract that group of consumers now as well, because if we can attract the considerers, then we make the need to and the better to groups' lives really very, very normal. Gluten-free just becomes normal, which is what people want. People don't want to be different. So what's the big fuss about? Why is there so much fuss about gluten-free? Well, this is what gluten looks like. It's the elastic protein. I'm sure as children you've mixed flour up with water and sort of held it, and it becomes very glutinous and elastic. And it's that elasticity that behaves a bit like bubble gum in bread. The elastic gluten basically traps the bubbles of carbon dioxide made by the yeast and just blows up like bubble gum. And when that bubbly structure goes into the oven, it then sets, because it's protein, it sets, and then you end up with your lovely chewy bread at the end of it. Also, gluten is very important for the layers in pastry, in croissant, pain au chocolat. It also helps to keep pastry together when you're rolling it out. So it's very, very important structurally for all of the baked products that we take for granted, that we don't think about, we just eat. If you add water to gluten-free flours, you could drink the mixture. There is no structure at all. It's like, a glass of milk. There's nothing. So when you go about developing a gluten-free product, you're having to create that structure from nothing at all. There's nothing there. And there isn't a wheat flour is the most incredible ingredient. It is unique in its behaviour as a structural ingredient. So there's nothing else that you can just slot in instead of wheat flour. You can't just think, okay, well, I'll just use rice flour instead, because there's no structure. You have to use a whole blend of ingredients. So in a normal loaf of bread, you might have 5 ingredients. In gluten-free bread, you'll have 20. And it's a mix of fibres and gums and starches, lots of different starches, egg to help set it. There's all sorts of different ingredients that go into making a gluten-free baked product. And though that blend of ingredients is incredibly sensitive, so even the slightest change, you will have a completely different product. And so it's not easy. And I think the reason I felt I had a good chance of cracking at least part the way to a decent loaf of bread was my background. I'm a trained chef. I trained at Leith School of Food and Wine in London. Then went to work at a Michelin star restaurant in London called Bibendum, which was the most appalling experience. It was very good for me, it toughened me up, made me realise I could work sort of 18 hours a day for £150 a week with some pretty awful people, but it was really good for me. I'm really pleased I did it. I also then went back to Leith's as a teacher, and they asked me to write the Leith's Techniques Bible, which is about the functionality of ingredients in cooking. Why do we use wheat flour? Why do we use eggs? Why do we use dairy? What are they all doing in the food that we eat every day of the week? And then that took me 4 years to write. And while I was writing that, I had my first 2 children that obviously had these dietary restrictions. So I thought, okay, so I now know what those ingredients are doing normally. So I can probably figure out a way of substituting them with other ingredients. And so I wrote How to Cook for Food Allergies, which is all about substituting ingredients in cooking. And the hardest recipe to get right for that book was bread. And the reason for that is bread is 50% wheat flour and 50% water. So if you take the wheat flour away, there's nothing. I mean, you could drink the water and the yeast and that and salt, and that's about it. So I had to figure out a way of taking that wheat flour away and finding 50% of a recipe that would then come together to create the bread that I was looking to produce. So it took quite a long time to do. I became completely obsessed. It took 3 years in total, year and a half to 2 years working in my kitchen at home. My children would come back from school to little bricks that gradually got bigger and bigger and bigger, and quite often a very frustrated mother. And then once I'd actually got something that they said, wow, that tastes delicious, I thought, right, I must be onto something here now. So I now need to go and find a bakery because I need to commercialise this. I'm not going to show it to anyone until I've commercialised it. I need to be able to prove that it can be done. So I then went to see United Central Bakeries, who it was total fate, really. I was living in Edinburgh, and I had 3 small children, and there just so happened to be the biggest gluten-free bakery just down the road in Bathgate. And that was, I do believe a lot of business is luck. Great business success, you have to put some of it down to luck and to fate, which is quite something. So I went to see United Central Bakeries. They were blown away. They agreed to help me work the recipe up into something that we could take to the supermarkets. That took another year to do. Really hard work working in the bakery. Big pieces of equipment that go wrong all the time. A tap sort of half a mile away for water. To clean a bowl out. Just the distances and the hard, sheer grind of working in a factory is tough. And I have so much respect for guys that work in factories day in, day out. It's really hard. Oh, is it not working? So anyway, after 3 years, we came up with a product we were really happy with. It's sliced and held together. It was natural. I'd wanted to strip out all of the unnatural ingredients in the bread, and put really great, wholesome ingredients that I felt really proud of into our bread. It's weird that I've written gluten and wheat free. You'd have thought that was obvious, but actually the reason for that is at the time Codex wheat starch was used in huge quantities in the gluten-free breads available, which I found very, very confusing for consumers. That there they were being told they couldn't have wheat, but they were finding wheat Codex starch, which was the starch that had been washed away from the gluten. And actually, it made people ill still. So I felt that was really important to get that out. I wanted the bread to be high in fibre, and I wanted to make great sandwiches. And so we had a product at the end of that absolutely stood up to all those things. And back to luck. While I was developing that, I would drop my little boy off at school, and there was a father there who would say, "So how's the bread? How's the bread?" And I said, "Bill, you can try it when it's ready. How's the bread?" And he asked me how the bread was every day for 3 years, pretty much. And he's quite a determined man. And when it was finally ready, I dropped some around to his house, and he rang me the following day and he said, "Lucinda, I don't know whether you know who I am." He said it in the nicest possible way. He didn't sound it. It was perfectly sort of grounded. He just said, "I'm Sir Bill Gamble. I'm the CEO and founder of Cairn Energy Oil. I can pretty much have whatever I want in life, but I can't have bread. I'm celiac. And this is going to make all the difference to me. It's going to make all the difference to loads of other people out there. And I'd really like to back you with money and with a team that can help you take this to market properly." I was just it just wasn't what I was expecting at all. I was going to go at it, on my own, with a little van, driving it around Edinburgh, building up a marketing story, taking it to a retailer, saying, "Look, there are loads of people who want this." But it would have taken me ages. And Bill was worried that, it was a great product, someone else would go off with the idea. So I felt, right, better go for it then. Fantastic opportunity. So 2008, I was a mum at home. End of 2008, I was working with a really great team of people in Edinburgh. And, we back to deluding. There we were, there was a group of us working together to create the brand, etc. But we hadn't ever sold any bread. We felt we had something fantastic, but we needed to go out there into the marketplace and really make sure that we did. And so we went, we had focus groups all around the country, and we took videos of people trying the bread, and there were people crying and people who were too scared to try the bread because they thought it was too like normal bread. There had to be something weird about it. And it was just such powerful footage that Tesco basically agreed on the back of the footage and trying the product, obviously, decided to launch us into 700 stores nationwide. So we'd never actually produced any bread one day. And then the next day we were producing bread for 700 stores across the UK. And not only were we doing that, but the feedback, so the feedback we got from consumers was just outstandingly it was just amazing. It was overwhelming. We had mothers crying on the phone because their little boy wasn't being bullied in the playground anymore because his packed lunch looked like all his friends. Mums, women ringing and just saying, "Golly, I can eat my sandwich now at lunchtime, and no one's staring at my lunchbox. No one's saying, 'What's that?' I just feel normal again." And because of the extent to which it changed people's lives, it was a bit of a wartime mentality. People knew what days the bread was going to be delivered to Tesco, and they would queue outside before the shop opened, and they would buy cases at a time. So we had a major availability issue because the retailers just hadn't quite got to grips with the fact there was such demand for it. So they weren't ordering enough. And so we had people saying, where can I get it? You know, is it only Tesco? We had loads of people saying, why is it just in Tesco? People really frustrated. And these were all the reasons that, you know, it created such a big, you know, emotional reaction from people. Bread is highly emotive. And I think the fact that we brought this bread to market that people didn't believe was possible gave them the new and desperately needed possibility that there were lots of other delicious gluten-free products to come that we'd actually shown it was possible to do. So that was really so important for the success of our business, that we had shown people, and we still have people ringing us today, look, how about a donut? Can you make us a donut? You know, how about a calzone pizza? Desperate for one of those. People know it's possible now and they want it now. And it's because, you know, people know that it's possible. We've raised the bar, and we gave our manufacturing, we gave our competitors a shock. People had to raise the game. You know, people couldn't get away with just putting nonsense on the shelves anymore. So just a quick look over the history. Genius was born in 2009 into Tesco. We won lots of awards because of the innovative nature of the product. I wanted to get the bread into, I wanted to get it as available to people as possible, so we got it into Starbucks as a sandwich. We got it onto prescription for people who couldn't afford to buy it. Gluten-free products are much more expensive because all of the ingredients come from overseas. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, people are diagnosed quite late in life quite often. So lots of retired people who couldn't afford the prices, so it was really important that we got it on prescription, which is no easy thing to do. It takes a long time to do. In 2011, the competition was growing, so we wanted to get into other areas of the supermarkets. We launched a frozen range of pies. We went into America. We licensed a bakery in Canada to help us make the bread. Nightmare trying to get the bread working over there, because the bread's so sensitive to make, and because it's 50% water. The water is different in Canada, and the environment is different. In the winter, the bakeries were -10, and in the summer it was 40 degrees, and just serious challenges. But we got there in the end, and the bread sells very well over there. We also launched 12 products in Spain in the freezer. We felt that in the freezer it gave people that fresh tasting experience when they defrosted the product. We didn't want to go back into this matte pack, miserable long life format, because the one thing I think is so important is our products are designed to thrill and never disappoint. It's all about thrilling people. We were finding it really hard licensing our products to bakeries. It was very hard. We didn't have control over the quality, proper control over the quality, or even control over innovation pace. Because we were working to someone else's agenda. You know, they had other products that they were making. The bakery that we went into business with actually as well started competing with us with their own range of fresh gluten-free breads. So we felt really what we needed to do was buy them. So we actually bought the bakery that I'd first approached last February in Bathgate, and as part of that deal we also took on a bakery in Hull as well. So we are now the proud owners. We went from 20 people at Genius to 420 last February, so quite a change, but the proud owner of 2 excellent bakeries full of lots of lovely people to make our products. We've also gone into deeper into Europe, into Holland. We've expanded into Cafe Nero to make out and be eating on the go easier for people. We've also launched in Australia with a frozen range, so the bread is sent all the way down to Australia on frozen pallets. And the Australians are real Genius fans because they've tried it when they've been in Britain, gone back. The bread over there is quite old-fashioned. So that's actually been brilliant. So we've come on a long way over the last year. We've gone from a turnover of 1.2 million in the first year to 41 now, because as part of the acquisition, we took on an own label business and another brand called Livewell as well. So we're a much bigger concern now. We're market leaders in bread. We're UK brand leaders in gluten-free. We're working really hard at availability. Availability is everything. People have to be able to buy your product. So we've increased our distribution enormously over the last year, both in the UK and in other parts of the world. So this gives you a view of where we are now. We are gradually making our way across the globe, which is very exciting. And back to your point, you need people in country to expand your business, and finding distributors who buy into your values and buy into selling the products in the way you want to be sold is really hard. Finding the right people is really hard. The free-from category is highly dynamic. There's lots more to go for. You can see just how much growth there is over the next few years. The global gluten-free market is valued at 4.2 billion now, and is set to grow to 6.6 billion by 2017. So it's a really fast-growing category. In the UK, it's worth 299 million and is growing at 25.1%. So it is one of the fastest-growing categories probably in the food industry. And then by 2016, Mintel forecasts that the category will be valued at about 519 million. So obviously there's a massive opportunity here that we absolutely want to be riding that wave and staying ahead, which requires huge innovation and working really hard at our availability. Most of our business is in bread, as I've said. We also have products in, we do cakes, we do morning goods, which is croissant, pain au chocolat, and rolls. And Breads of the World is a really fast-growing part of this market. So we're looking at heavily innovating around flatbreads and that sort of thing. So this shows the growth that we've enjoyed over the last 7 years. We've just got to keep it going in the same direction. You get different challenges as your business grows. This gives you a picture of the distribution that we're working to at the moment. We really are absolutely focused on increasing distribution across the UK and the globe, so that people can actually buy our products. It's one of the hardest parts of growing your business. We have 3 different arms to our business. We have the Genius brand, obviously, which offers the best quality premium gluten-free products on the market. We make a number of own label products for the retailers, and so that's quite a balancing that relationship with the retailers. And then Livewell is a sort of that is a map-packed, old-fashioned gluten-free brand that we've taken on. Very interesting, because we've actually bought a brand that stands for what I was rejecting in the first place. So what do we do with it? We're just figuring out our strategy. How do we make Livewell work? Livewell's a great name, absolutely lends itself to health, and so we're working really hard to develop that at the moment. So really, for future, very important that quality is absolutely top of the agenda, always working to the best quality. Innovation, really important. Innovation drives the market, grows the market by 25% year on year. Really important that we're always innovating, never being complacent. Absolutely stretching ourselves to the hilt so that we can get out into new markets before other people get there, but never compromising on quality. So there's all of these balancing. It's a big balancing act all the time, and never forgetting about our core consumers. So consumer is king. Absolutely. If you're not pleasing a consumer, you don't have a business. So so being very, very true to our values. The consumers buy into the truth of the brand, the fact that there's someone at the centre of the brand that lives on a daily basis with a gluten-free lifestyle at home. People really buy into that. And that we stay loved. We've got a really great loyal consumer base. So that's important. We want gluten-free to equal normality. That's when we know we've succeeded. When when we know that the quality is no different to mainstream, when we know that the prices are the same as mainstream foods, when the availability is the same. You know, when you can buy a Genius product at the top of Ken Gorm, you know, in the Ptarmigan Cafe, that's when I'll think, great, you've made it. That will be a real success. And you know, that gluten-free is just embraced as a normal part of people's diets. So just quickly, top tips. You need to have a great product. You need to think big. Don't limit how your business can grow. Get funding. You know, don't be greedy. At some point, you're going to have to give some of your business away. Really important if you're going to grow. You can't just keep it all to yourself. I think that's really important. You need to get the right people into your business. The funding will fund great talent in your business, you know, promoting your business. All really important. You have to invest in the brand. You need to build a great brand that people believe in, understand, love. Never be complacent. Always be working to stay ahead. Never think that you're better than anyone else, because there's always someone in the background, you know, trying to get in there. Listening to consumers, really, really important. And as I said before, making sure you enjoy it along the way. So thank you very much for listening.